Welcome, everyone, to my detailed breakdown of all Dragon Quest VIII ports, comparing each one based on their merits, including all available modifications and enhancements for each. This includes much lesser-known caveats, technical drawbacks, etc. You know, the kind of real reporting the fake news gaming media can't be bothered to do. If you're looking for someone to tell you a single definitive version you should play or circle jerk your pathetic preferred port, you're not gonna find it here. Each port has their merits and is worth a play of their own. This video is intended to give you a good idea of what the strengths are for each port and which one you might want to play next. Each mod I am aware of will be mentioned specifically, and there will be a link placed in the description for each. Okay guys, let's get into it. Elania will dust my Cheeto looking as if I'm late to dinner again.
I've probably said it before, but it beats me how you ended up working for an old codger like him. Not that I can talk, though, eh? Guess people say the same thing about me. Working for you.
Old codger? I do hope you're not referring to me. What would you know? What would you know? A lowlife like you wouldn't recognize nobility if it came up and bit you on the
Back already? Damn. Well, this comparison will be divided up into three distinct sections. First, graphics/presentation, second, music and voiceovers, and finally, content, gameplay, and quality of life. Also note that I will be talking about the Dragon Quest VIII mobile remaster mod, which overhauls the entire mobile port, not the unmodified piece of garbage version. If you're not already familiar with it, check the links in the description, or just search DQ8 mobile remaster mod here on YouTube. I'm going to split graphics and presentation into the following categories: models and textures, pre-rendered cutscenes, lighting and reflections, animations and physics, and finally performance. Bear in mind that I'm not bothering to include native resolution in this comparison, as each can be increased through the use of emulators. DQ8MR is 1080p by default. For textures, each one of these ports has an HD texture pack available with DQ8MR. That's built in and included with the remaster mod. PS2 has an incredible pack by 1V-Rock and Hufflescuff, while 3DS has a pack by Shining Red. The 3DS pack by Shining Red was started a few years ago and unfortunately was never completed. It's a relatively simple upscale and doesn't do anything too drastic. A nice improvement, but very modest compared to the other two. DQ8MR includes a far more aggressive upscale. It's a vast, sweeping improvement overall, but has imperfections. 1V-Rock and Hufflescuff's 4K texture pack is by far the best of the three. 1V-Rock is an experienced artist who has done this for dozens of titles. They used a combination of different upscalers along with some manual corrections in Photoshop to get the very best results. It should be considered that DQ8MR uses native texture replacement, while the packs for PS2 and 3DS require an emulator for texture injection. In short, it's a bit better for performance and reliability, but an in-depth discussion is outside the scope of this video. Four models, PS2 and mobile, appear to be basically identical, while 3DS has noticeably reduced geometry. This extends beyond just characters and includes environmental elements such as trees and foliage. For pre-rendered cutscenes, neither PS2 nor 3DS have any improvement mods for this, while DQ8MR has upscaled cutscenes that are also interpolated to run at 60 frames per second. PS2's pre-rendered cutscenes are rendered in 480p, while 3DS is 240p. DQ8MR is 1080p. DQ8MR's cutscenes are directly based on the original PS2 versions, while 3DS's were redone in engine, so they look a bit different and more in line with the in-game visuals. Now it's time to talk about lighting and reflections. PS2 is by far the best here with the full gamut of effects. When it was ported to Unity for the mobile version, and DQ8MR by extension, almost all of these effects were lost along with much of the game's lighting profile. Shadows were no longer cast by characters and reflections were gone everywhere, whether it was the mirrors in certain rooms, the ice in coats, or the glossy floor of the casino. The 3DS version arguably made the lighting even worse by making everything full bright with an extremely saturated palette. Some reflections were restored by creating a duplicate model as with ice or mirrors. These aren't real reflections all of the PS2 version, and certain quirks can be experienced such as with photo mode. Other cases, such as the glossy casino floor, have no such reflections for the same reason. For the animations and physics, it's important to mention the engine that each port was built on. PS2 was a custom engine made by Level 5. For the most part, everything was pretty darn good, but you had some minor jank such as the startup frames on the running/walking animation. If the game is forced to 60 FPS by a cheat code, many animations get completely borked. As mentioned before, mobile and DQ8MR by extension is made in Unity. Unity handles the animations and physics extremely well. They are maybe the best and smoothest of any port. The animations can be interpolated to 60 FPS or higher and remain perfect, smooth as butter. The only jank I have found is with picking up and throwing barrels depending on where the player moves before throwing. Interestingly, they removed the ability to walk around while carrying barrels in the 3DS version, possibly due to the same jank. The 3DS version uses its own custom engine, which appears to have the code name of Honey when data mining the files. It has the animation jank of the PS2 version along with reduced interpolation on the animations, making them choppier, likely done to improve performance on the 3DS limited hardware. With performance, there are a number of variables to consider here. First, if you are emulating in the case of the PS2 and 3DS versions, you're going to have to deal with a performance and accuracy trade-off. That's going to depend on the power of the device you're emulating on and the emulator of choice. PCSX2, Atheros X2, and Citro all have significant issues still when it comes to accuracy on almost all hardware. Still, you are able to get 90+% performance and 90+% accuracy with fairly new moderate to high-end hardware on PC. That'll be fine for most people unless you're the type, like myself, to be bothered by the last 10%, such as those Hollywood elites I love to shit on. 2024, baby, let's go.
Now hold the fuck on here, Donald. You want people to pay the greedy bastards at Square Enix and purchase a 10 to 20-year-old game.
Shut the fuck up, Hillary, and go suck a cock. No, I don't care where you choose to get the game from or how much you pay. It's frequently discounted to $15 on the Play Store, but you can emulate it for all I give a shit. Just don't come at me and tell me that emulation is a flawless endeavor, because I've been in the scene long enough to know that's a load of horse shit. Used copies are expensive, and mudding a used copy is a long shot on top of that. So for the sake of my sanity, I will use the capabilities of the PS2 and 3DS native hardware as the basis of my comparison. DQ8MR will likewise depend on the specs of your Android phone for performance, but we can surmise based on the recommended specs which any phone made post-2018 can manage. PS2 runs at a rock-solid 30 FPS. I don't know if I've ever seen a dip below that on native hardware. 3DS is likewise 30 but has some notable dips to around 20 FPS at times. DQ8MR is a mostly solid 50 FPS but can dip to around 40 in some large cities such as the Isle of Neos. Let's also briefly address draw distance and field of view. 3DS does some aggressive culling here to maintain performance, so there are many instances of noticeable popping. While DQ8MR and PS2 are virtually identical in this regard, and here's a comparison of horizontal field of view between the three platforms. As you can see, DQ8MR has the smallest horizontal field of view between the three, though not by a large margin surprisingly. While it makes up this difference with a large vertical field of view, 3DS comes up a little ahead here, but is noticeably behind the PS2 version, which has undeniably the best horizontal field of view between the three. Here's a breakdown of everything under graphics/presentation, with a rough, completely arbitrary rating for each port based on every point discussed. The bottom line is that the PS2 port is by and large the best in this category, having the best models, textures, lighting, draw distance, and field of view, with DQ8MR rounding second with small advantages in pre-rendered cutscenes, performance, animations, and physics. Now we're going to talk about the music and voiceovers. Once again, for the sake of simplicity, we are only going to go over the orchestral soundtracks and not the synthesized versions except where appropriate. Something that a lot of people fail to realize is that there are two different orchestral soundtracks for Dragon Quest VIII. There is the 2004 soundtrack, and there is the 2015 soundtrack. In my opinion, the 2015 soundtrack sounds significantly better with better recordings, a clearer sound with less reverb, and more consistent, sometimes slightly more upbeat tempo to boot. For the international release on the 3DS version, there is the orchestral patch by Asia 81 and Davuit, which simply pulls the orchestral tracks from the Japanese 3DS release, while the DQ8MR also includes rips directly from the 2015 soundtrack. PS2 features the 2004 soundtrack with minimal compression. 3DS, however, suffers due to using the SPA DPCM compression. This will also come up when discussing voiceovers as well. Some tracks in the game, and this goes for every port, were never orchestrated. This includes many nighttime themes. PS2 used MIDI and played this back in real time. 3DS used recorded synthesized tracks, so it sounds a bit different. In my opinion, some are better, some are worse, but mostly just different. For voiceovers, PS2 features the original iconic cast and lines. 3DS changes some voices, with Jessica being the most well-known, but also lines from Mori and the Monster Arena announcer were done.
So, ragazzo, you are a traveler, si?
So, ragazzo, you are a traveler, si?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Monster Arena is proud to present a Rank A battle!
Ladies and gentlemen, the Monster Arena is proud to present a Rank A battle!
You killed my brother! Now you'll suffer the same fate!
You killed my brother! Now you'll suffer the same fate!
I see you've ignored my advice to prepare a stronger defense.
I see you've ignored my advice to prepare a stronger defense.
Additional lines were also added in many spots for minor characters, such as the hammerhead that blocks your path in the waterfall cave, the kids outside the royal hunting ground, some of the prisoners at Purgatory Island, etc.
Well, you must be really brave to come up and talk to me like this. A man that looked like a peddler came along earlier, but when he saw me, he ran away without saying a word.
Was a salamango! Argon lizards absolutely adore them! People say sleeping lizards wake up on the first whiff of one.
Oi! What do you think you're doing? There's no point in making a fuss. You'll be stuck in there till you kick the bucket. So just keep a lid on it, and stop making such a racket!
There's no difference between night and day down here, but I can still judge the passing of time. It looks like it's that time again. The guards change shift once a day, so I can always tell when I'm one day closer to heaven.
Once again on 3DS, voiceover quality suffers due to the use of DSP and DPCM compression.
The magic mirror? But it's a precious royal heirloom. Why on earth do you require it? Explain yourself. The magic mirror? But it's a precious royal heirloom. Why on earth do you require it? Explain yourself.
Hold your horses, Grandad. I thought it was Dalmagus we was after. Hold your horses, Grandad. I thought it was Dalmagus we was after.
I am not your granddad! And of course Dulmagos is our man. He's the one who turned Medea and I into such laughing-stocks. I am not your granddad. And of course Dulmagos is our man. He's the one who turned Medea and I into such laughing-stocks.
Au revoir for now. Myella Abbey, all right? Just ask for Angelo. Don't forget. Au revoir for now. Myella Abbey, all right? Just ask for Angelo. Don't forget.
A handful of lines were changed in the localization between 3DS and PS2. Included are a couple examples here.
What a tragic affair. There can be no question. This is Dulmagos' treachery.
Cool, blimey!
What a tragic affair. There can be no question. This is Dulmagos' treachery.
Cool, blimey, Grandad. Where'd you spring from?
Well, they say time heals all wounds. Let's hope your living here will make everything all right. Now, come along with me. From today onwards, this will be your home. Why don't I introduce you to everyone?
Not long after that, I heard the full story for the first time. About how I had a half-brother who was born from an affair between my father and one of the maids. And that was Marcello. If I hadn't been born, he'd have been next in line to my father. But when I was born, Marcello and his mother were thrown out of the house with nothing to their names. She died soon afterwards. He had no one. So he ended up at the Abbey, hating me and my father for all those years.
Well, they say time heals all wounds. Let's hope your living here will make everything all right. Now, come along with me. From today onwards, this will be your home. Why don't I introduce you to everyone?
Not long after that, I heard the full story for the first time. About how I had a half-brother, the product of a fling my father had with a peasant girl before he married. He disowned the woman and her child, presumably because of his engagement to my mother. The poor girl was heartbroken, of course. So heartbroken that she couldn't go on living, they say. And so the child was left alone in the world. That's Marcello's story, you see. As my mother had been told she couldn't have children, my parents discussed adopting him. But the physician must have been wrong, because my mother fell pregnant with me shortly after. That put paid to the adoption idea, and Marcello was unceremoniously dispatched to the Abbey. Twice cast aside by his own father, Marcello ended up hating him, and hating me, naturally, as he grew up among the Templars.
On 3DS, Japanese voiceovers were added to the Japanese release. These can be patched into the international version by way of the undubbed mod by Asia81 and DQ8MR. These replace the original English lines and unfortunately cannot be swapped on the fly as a result.
What was she rabbiting on about? Come round my house, she says.
なんでですかい、あの娘っ子は。井戸の前が私の家ったって。She wasn't afraid to look at me at all, not one bit. Oh, she reminds me of my Medea.
このわしを見ても怖がらぬとは、さすが我が娘ミーティアと同じ年頃じゃ。
Finally, the Dragon Quest VIII mobile remaster modded all 3 voiceover options. The original PS2 voiceovers with the highest quality, the 3DS English voiceovers with the added and changed lines, and the Japanese 3DS voiceovers as well. The voiceovers can be swapped on the fly, with settings in both the main menu as well as in-game.
こんなところで油を売ってると、すぐに日が暮れちまうでゲス。早いとこ町に行きましょうや。あっしはパーッと飲み明かしたい気分でがすよ。さあ、兄貴。Well, they certainly took us by surprise, but nothing we couldn't handle, eh? Now, where's the princess? Where's my Medea? My precious one and only daughter. と何度も言うようでがすが、兄貴がこのおかしなおっさんの家来なんてね。
Ah, there you are. So what are you two up to?
Up to? Me and the Gov was just talking, that's...
Gov, huh? I've been meaning to ask you about that.
About that? You know, he doesn't exactly look like your governor.
If anything, it looks the other way around. What's the story?
Well, I'm glad you asked. The story of how me and the Gov fell in together is an epic tale. Full of laughter, thrills and tears. And that's when I run into the Gov here. Hold it right there. Who gave you permission to use my bridge then, eh?
Permission? Permission? Your bridge lies within my kingdom, you oaf.
What are you on about? A creepy old codger like you? A kid...
Don't make me laugh. I see your mouth is as vulgar as your face. Yes, I'm the king. And who exactly do you think you are?
Me? Hearing my name is enough to make anyone wet their knickers. That's right. You're talking to none other than Yangus, the legendary bandit himself.
Yangus?
The one and only. Time to cough up. You have to pay if you want to cross my bridge.
One and only Yangus? What a shame there aren't more of you. Now kindly remove your one and only self from my bridge and clear off.
Don't push your luck, you green-faced freak. I would have let you go if you'd have kept your gob shut and paid up. But you want to do this the hard way, eh?
Here's another breakdown with completely arbitrary scores based on the points discussed. DQ8MR is out in both categories here. First with music due to using the 2015 soundtrack and minimal compression. Then with voiceovers due to the option to switch between all 3 voiceover styles on the fly. PS2 gets a small bump on music due to using the older 2004 soundtrack, though no fault of its own, while 3DS gets bumped due to the harsh compression imposed by hardware limitations. While with voiceovers, PS2 gets a small knock due to having no Japanese translation and few voice lines. Once again, no fault of its own. 3DS gets knocked due to compression, and while it has Japanese translation, it cannot be swapped on the fly. Finally, we have content, gameplay, and quality of life. For as much as we've ragged on 3DS so far, this is an area which it truly outshines the other ports. We will be splitting this section into content, censorship, controls, UI, and quality of life. Content, first, with regard to PS2, it has well over 100 hours worth of content if you're playing through all of the post-game Monster Arena, crafting all alchemy recipes, etc. Is absolutely no shortage on things to do by all measures, but as it were, the other ports add even more. DQ8MR adds a small amount of additional content, including some new items, equipment, hidden alchemy recipes, and the like. It's fairly incremental and doesn't do too much. This includes a small amount of restored and used content, such as the Trodain soldier's uniform, holy moly water, and classic pearly gates, which can be used once the Templar captain's ring is given by Marcello. The 3DS version absolutely blows the other two out of the water here, and its two new playable characters in Ren and Mori, new items and equipment, new monsters, new Monster Arena challenges, an alternate ending sequence, new cutscenes that explore the backstory of various characters, new cosmetics for all of the playable cast, codex quests, which challenge a player to explore and discover various obscure monsters and locations in the game world, 2 post-game dungeons with 2 unique bosses and 22 bus ray fights. It should also be added that, in addition to all of this, there is also a randomizer mod by Play in Full as well as an alternate color outfits pack. To start out with censorship, it's well known that many outfits for Jessica and a few female NPCs were significantly altered compared to PS2 and mobile. Some of the most notable changes occurred to the magic bikini and dangerous bustier, while the bunny girl outfit arguably became skimpier. Of course, there is the outfit restoration mod by Kanzhan Dark Synopsis. This mod modifies a number of character models, while remaining consistent to the 3DS geometry. There were also a few cutscenes that were altered on the 3DS version, the first of which is seen where Rapthorn tries to take control of Marcello. In the PS2 and DQ8MR versions, Marcello stabs himself in the arm to prevent Rapthorn from taking control, where in 3DS this was changed so he uses magic. Another change cutscene occurs when Dominic calls David outside his mansion. In the PS2 version, he accuses him of trying to poison his dog, later forcing David to eat dog food. In the 3DS version, this was altered so that Dominic accuses David for being late feeding his dog dinner. Instead, the dog jumps at David to intimidate him.
Has this imbecile upset you too, Sir Leopold? Of course he has. Such impertinence! No doubt the vile thereabouts put poison in your food as well.
Please, Master! You must believe me. I would never serve Sir Leopold poison.
Why should I believe you? If you want to prove your innocence, you'll have to eat some yourself. Now, while I watch. Not like that. On your hands and knees. And look like you're enjoying it. That's it. It suits you, David. Well, Sir Leopold, he seems safe enough. Enjoy your dinner. David, Sir Leopold is as much your master as I am. I shouldn't have to remind you that you treat him with the utmost respect. Understood? Has this imbecile upset you too, Sir Leopold? Of course he has. Such impertinence. And as if omitting your title wasn't enough, No doubt the vile liabouts like feeding you too, hmm?
Please, Master, don't be angry. I'm more than happy to serve Leopold, Sir Leopold his dinner whenever he wants it.
And well you should be. Get on with it then, you disgusting little maggot.
Yes, Master. Once, Master.
Well, Sir Leopold, enjoy your dinner, now that it's finally arrived. David. Sir Leopold is as much your master as I am. I shouldn't have to remind you that you treat him with the utmost respect. Understood?
Now I'd like to briefly touch on controls. Both the PS2 and 3DS versions use traditional button controls, which perform fairly similarly for the most part, whereas the mobile version and DQ8MR by extension use touch controls exclusively, with no support for Bluetooth controllers yet at this juncture. However, the touch controls work surprisingly well for movement in the overworld due to the reduced input latency of the remaster mod and excellent placement of the touchpad and camera controls, while battles and menus work excellently and so intuitively due to the reworked UI in this version. That said, it is still lacking compared to traditional controls. Speaking of UI, let's go over each port's user interface. Starting with the PS2 version. In this port, a lot was changed between the original Japanese release and the international release. The original Japanese version had a very traditional-looking user interface for the DQ series, while the international release made a drastic departure, opting for a fully immersive menu. This is excellent because it adds icons and many other graphical elements that not only make it more visually appealing than a nested menu system, but easier to navigate. In an RPG, this is extremely important. The only downside, in my view, is that this menu takes you completely away from the game world. It's a bit jarring in that sense. The battle menu was also reworked to be more visually appealing, with icons added in many spots to make things easier to navigate for new players as well. The 3DS goes back to the nested menu system, but it's a few visual improvements. The bottom screen is relegated to a near constant display of information such as the status of your party members or the area's map. DQ8MR features another drastic departure from the other versions, with an interface fully designed around touch. First, it features some lesser-known convenience options. There's a shortcuts button here, which pops out a menu that gives you immediate access to commonly used abilities and items such as a Ren's Bell or the Godbird Soulstone when you have unlocked them, an auto-run button, which makes the player character run on their own, and you can steer by using the camera controls with just one hand, great for very lazy players. And finally, an interactive map, which can be hidden at any time. Tapping it will bring up the full area map or the world map. The battle menu UI was extremely innovative. First, the actions for every party member can be chosen in any order. Second, the battle AI and manual select options are perfectly integrated. At the start of battle, without setting any party member actions, every character will fight wisely, meaning that if you just want to go through a battle quickly without any tactics, you can just hit execute at the bottom. By tapping, you can get the normal command menu where you can select any option, and it's much faster than scrolling around with a D-pad or analog stick. On every subsequent turn, the previous action or layer setting, if applicable, will be selected. So no more selecting actions every turn or ashing lay like in the other ports. Now it's time to address quality of life. Once again, we'll start off with the PS2 version. It goes without saying that it is a timeless classic, a masterpiece, but has shown its age over the years. There are several mechanics that are designed to arbitrarily lengthen play time, such as the alchemy pod, which requires the player to take a certain number of steps in the overworld for each recipe crafted. Many late-game pieces of equipment have recipes which require extremely rare drops. hence immense amounts of grinding, or finite items such as alchemy, which there only exist a few in a playthrough, meaning you'll have some items which can never be crafted. The skill seeds become extremely valuable in the late game due to the lack of the ability to reallocate skill points and diminishing returns for skill points on level up later in the game. Once again, you'll be begging for those drops. There were also some balancing discrepancies between the skill trees, making the inability to respec extremely frustrating for players. Still, despite these issues, this port is perfect for a leisurely playthrough. You know, the old-fashioned kind that you sit down on your couch with a controller and a friend, a prime mob player's guide, and you enjoy the ride. On the other hand, in this fast-paced modern landscape, that's not going to work for some people who don't have all the time in the world. For them, the other ports are going to be far more suitable. DQ8MR is close to the PS2 version, but features a buttload of quality of life changes. Let's start with the ones inherited from the standard mobile version. First, the alchemy pot is now instantaneous. No waiting at all to complete an alchemy recipe. Alchemy recipes can now also be completed directly via recipe and will give hints based on the items you have. This works extremely well for obscure recipes which aren't found in the game. However, unlike the 3DS version, DQ8MR will not completely give them away. Maps are given for each area automatically. There is no need to find them. Chests which contain maps now contain gold. Players also start the game with more gold. The previously mentioned auto-run feature, which makes navigation easier. The shortcuts menu, also previously mentioned, makes fast travel far easier. Churches now directly tell you of your experience to next level without needing to ask. And an autosave feature, which is an absolute savior. The autosave works very similar to modern DQ titles such as Dragon Quest XI. Whenever you enter a loading zone and after every battle, the game will autosave, meaning you are covered just about any time. The rest are added by the mobile remaster mod. This includes a full rebalance of the skill trees to make weaker abilities more viable. This makes previously poor skill trees such as Hero Boomerangs, Angus and Clubs, Jessica Knives and Staves, etc., and brings them up to the level of the other skill trees. Under the hood, pacing improvements, a small bump in gold, experience rewards, monster drops aimed at reducing grinding, a small reduction in random encounter rate, buffs to holy water protection, reduced cost for reviving party members at church, buffs to previously low-tier weapons, the addition of extremely rare items to hid shops for very high price, a backup save bank for extra saves. Finally, the ability to reallocate skill points on the fly. This makes trying out certain skill trees and builds much less punishing and provides a lot more variety to the gameplay. And so much more I could not manage to list exhaustively here. DQ8MR really adds a lot of nice refinements to the classic DQ8 experience without any major overhauls in the quality of life arena. For the 3DS version, we have more drastic quality of life changes. The alchemy pot is instant like DQ8MR. However, the system has been replaced when combining ingredients. There is no longer any real element of experimentation, as now the alchemy pot will no longer let you add ingredients that are incompatible whatsoever. Once an initial ingredient is added, every incompatible item will be grayed out, and only compatible items will be highlighted and selectable. This makes every alchemy a dead giveaway and virtually makes finding recipes in the game world entirely unnecessary. On the plus side, the 3DS version also allows you to alchemy-wise items in batches or multiples. This could be really useful if you're using it as a way of farming and selling off crafted items for gold. 3DS features a quick save option, which effectively allows you to manual save anywhere outside of a church on a temporary save file that is deleted on resume. However, 3DS does not feature any autosave function. I repeat, there is no autosave on 3DS. 3DS features the same changes with regard to the maps that DQ8MR has, with every map being available immediately, and chests that contained maps in PS2 contain gold. In 3DS, they took this one step further and upgraded item rewards in a handful of chests throughout the world. Additionally, they added many blue chests which periodically refill with a random reward. While 3DS doesn't have a natural pacing improvement, it adds a fast-forward battles feature. This speeds up all animations in battle to twice as fast, but does not improve pacing in the overworld. Perhaps the single biggest quality of life improvement is the removal of random encounters in favor of on-field encounters in 3DS, meaning you just walk up to enemies. They don't give much of a chase, however. Finally, 3DS has numerous minor balancing tweaks. Many are similar to what was mentioned with the DQ8MR, with increased gold and experience rewards. A few skill tree abilities were fixed slightly, though much fewer than DQ8MR fixed. For example, Jessica Knives and Angus Clubs are still virtually useless. MP and HEP now fully restore after level up, skill point adjustments, etc. Finally, one last arbitrary scoring breakdown by category. 3DS comes well away the best of the three here, having the best content, controls, and QOL improvements. The other two ports virtually tie in a couple categories, with the only difference maker being that DQ8MR finishes a solid second in content and quality of life. And here's a total of all three sections added up. As you can see, the scores aren't really weighted, and if they were, at the end of the day, they'd end up about the same. Here is how I would briefly summarize the three. PS2 has the best graphics and presentation. 3DS has the best gameplay and content. DQ8MR is the most accessible and a middle ground between the other two in most respects. It can be downloaded on any Android phone and is by far the easiest to legally purchase in the year of our Lord 2023, being available digitally in less than $20 most of the time. One last thing, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. The constant fucking port begging. Please
shut the fuck up!
Stop it. Get some help.
There is no definitive version, and yes, we all wish for one, but you know the old saying, you can one in one hand and shit in the other to see which one fills up faster. In other words, opinions are like as holes. Based on the current release roadmap for the series, it does not appear like there will be a remake of Dragon Quest VIII anytime in the near future. Every time a remake is brought up, it's always just venting to other fans of the series on a forum like, fuck man, you're preaching to the goddamn choir here. No, Japanese Square Enix executives aren't scrolling Reddit looking for the genius opinion of some fat fuck like yourself. If you want to make a difference, there are many more effective ways to do so without just pissing off other fans and driving newcomers away from the series with this shit. Take a page from other fandos and submit feedback through official channels, such as the survey they put out a few months ago, or make your own project. The hunting community is always open to people who are willing to get their hands dirty. Lastly, thank you to anyone who managed to watch all the way through this video. If you know something that I forgot to mention, I'm always looking for feedback and will amend/polish the video in the future with a number of improvements.